All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Meredith, and I am a customer success manager at Blackbaud. And I'm going to be facilitating the session today. Encourage you all to take a minute and introduce yourselves in the chat. Would love to see where everyone is from. And if you do have questions throughout the session, feel free to put them in the Q&A. I will be monitoring throughout the session. And I'm going to introduce our main speaker today. We have Ashton King. He is the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at the local Office on Aging in Roanoke, Virginia. So Ashton, I will hand things over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Meredith. As Meredith said, my name is Ashton King. I'm Vice President, Chief Financial Officer at the local Office on Aging. We are a nonprofit, but also an area agency on aging. We serve Planning District number 5 in Virginia. So that's kind of like Southwestern Virginia. If you're familiar to Virginia Tech, anything like that, that's the biggest thing near us. So kind of my purpose of today and giving this presentation is we transitioned over to the Blackbaud suite a little over a year ago. And during that transition time, Blackbaud was extremely helpful from the perspective of, like getting us up, what are the features, how do we get this going? However, it's always nice to kind of hear, okay, well, how did this actually work in real time? How did this go? And that's something that I really want to share with you guys today. How did we integrate this? How did we structure the development approach? Because ultimately, we still all have everything that's on our plate on a daily basis. And now we're going to be implementing new softwares, Financial Edge, Razor's Edge, things along those lines. So as we go through, we'll talk about the problem that we were facing, the planning and development cycle, phasic implementation, and then follow-up and monitoring. So a little bit about me. I'm from Christiansburg, which is right down the road. I usually stay pretty active. I golf, snowboard, play basketball. In this picture is my mother here and my pit Ridgeback mix. He is on the road everywhere with me. So fun fact about this was a turkey trot this past year. We were supposed to have like 20 people in my family do it. It was raining and cold, so everybody called and canceled. So my mom, Jocko, and I, we finished it, but it was a good time. So prior to this, a little bit about my career is I've been in both the for-profit and the not-for-profit spaces. I've been in the nonprofit space for about 5 years now. And the approach that I have in kind of managing the finances is a little bit of blend of both, right? Because on the nonprofit side, it's a little bit different than the for-profit side because you're not necessarily selling a product, anything along those lines. But, we really are serving clients, and we want to make sure that we're stewarding money as effectively as possible to best serve those clients, and also to be accountable to our donors, our grantors, so on and so forth. So that's kind of how we do this. And that was a big turning point in why we transitioned over to the Blackbaud suite, was to most effectively steward our dollars and make sure that we were serving clients in the best way possible. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the problem, what led us, to think about making the switch, and what were we thinking about other than Blackbaud. So the number one issue that we were facing is between HR, finance, and the CRM. We were looking at 6 different platforms. So for fundraising, marketing, finance, HR, they were all different platforms, which was a nightmare. So we were using GMS for finance, Every Action, Constant Contact, and a volunteer management module called Schedules Plus. On the fundraising and development side, we were using Centrally HR for the HR side, and then we were using good old-fashioned Excel for some modeling and forecasting. So as you can imagine, all of those things did not integrate. So there was a lot of going back and forth about, okay, well, this comes out of GMS, but then I need to pull a report out of every action to see the contributions. And then the contributions line item doesn't match up in our finance platform. So long story short, it was just a nightmare. On the GMS side, specifically in the finance software, we didn't really have all of the items that we necessarily needed to have a full, robust financial reporting platform. So our fixed assets, our depreciation workbook was tracked in Excel. So every time we got audited, we had to follow up with our auditors and say, this is the depreciation that we calculated. And then we had to go in and put that in accumulated depreciation and adjust our assets and expenses accordingly. Whereas with Financial Edge, you can do that all in there. Budgeting was just not very good. It was difficult to figure out, what are we spending money on? Are we over budget? Are we under budget? So on and so forth. Volunteer labor was not managed very well because, again, it was in a different platform. And then the in-kind, really, it was kind of at the end of the year, we had to get follow-ups to say, okay, well, you use this space for this amount of time, rather than kind of tracking that throughout the course of the year. On the CRM side, we were just very limited in our ability to scale. So, depending on our donor base, we're have a lot of manual processes following up. You look up and you're like, oh, I forgot to follow up with this donor after however many months, or this is the time that they give every single year, and you have that on your Outlook calendar rather than getting pinged reminders from your fundraising platform. And all of this led to difficulty collaborating as a team. We had a lot of paper floating around. I would get paperwork, but maybe our finance manager wouldn't get it, and maybe our development manager wouldn't get it. So then we're all, we're all in a tizzy trying to figure out what is going where. And we spent more time updating each other and trying to catch each other up rather than trying to, move forward and steward money well and raise more money and make sure that we were being as efficient as possible. So if you want to take a minute, and you don't have to, but if you want to take a minute, I know this resonated with me, and I know that this has resonated with other friends in the nonprofit space that I have. But if this has resonated with any of you guys, and you have any comments or questions on this point, please feel free to drop it in the chat, because it's always nice to hear like, oh, people are going through the same thing that we're going through. So if you have any comments, please feel free to put them in the chat right now. Okay, moving on to the planning and development phase. So, we've identified the issues that we're facing, and what specifically are we trying to correct about these items? It's one thing to say, hey, we got all these problems. However, it's another thing to, say, hey, we have these issues. Let's go ahead and work to create an action plan to correct these. And something that I can't speak about enough is I'm so proud of the team that I have here at the local office on aging. The support that we've gotten from our CEO and our board throughout this entire process has been phenomenal. The team that has worked on the project alongside me has been great. The Blackbaud team has been great. So it's really just been a huge team effort to be able to bring this all to fruition here. So who all is going to be involved? So myself, Vice President and CFO, so oversight and primarily the financial build out. Our development manager, she was phenomenal, Amy Lawson. So she built out pretty much the whole Razor's Edge platform. So how do we want to, how do we want donors to be listed, to how do we want to follow up with them, the reminders, how do we want it to flow, everything from the top down. She was phenomenal. Alongside our grants and special project manager, she did a lot of the CRM migration. So she was very comfortable with both the finance and the development side of things. So she was instrumental in taking the financial edge side of things and getting Razor's Edge to communicate correctly, and also making sure that our finance team knows what is coming out of Razor's Edge and into the Financial Edge platform. So she was phenomenal. The finance manager, our administrative assistants, and then our director of HR, They've been really instrumental in the finance manager getting people up and trained, being a resource outside of myself that can go and say, hey, I got a question on this. How do we do that? He's been phenomenal. My administrative assistant, just trying to keep, everything straight. Where are we at in the project? The meeting minutes, all of that. She was phenomenal. And then the director of HR, just making sure that it all integrates together. So when we transitioned over, we did Financial Edge, we did Razor's Edge, and then the whole CRM, the email forms, everything like that comes along with Razor's Edge. And then we also transitioned over to Paycor, which Paycor is an HR platform that also integrates directly with Blackbaud. So we went ahead and kind of made the full switch just to make sure that everything was integrating together. So she has been instrumental in kind of that process, making sure that deduction codes and labor codes and things like that are coming over correctly from the Financial Edge side and into the Paycor, the HR side of things. So we had to think about how long is this really going to take. So it all began at BBCon last year. So I was kind of tossing around the idea, hey, maybe we make the switch to this. I had seen that Blackbaud was a pretty big one. So I reached out to our CEO and I was like, hey, let's go ahead and go to Blackbaud. Let's go to their conference and kind of see what it's like. After we had researched different products, we had an idea that we wanted to go with Blackbaud, but we wanted to head over to BBCon to make sure that, okay, this is the route that we want to go. That was a phenomenal conference. It was great, just being able to speak with users, but also, a little bit more of the technical side of, okay, this is how this is going to work. This is how that's going to work. So that was a very beneficial event. And it's something that I would absolutely recommend if you are looking to modify or change your accounting platform into the Blackbaud or the CRM. Just going there and getting in touch with people that have been there and done that is always so useful, and I always enjoy my time. So in June 2024, we went ahead and signed the contract. So now we are going on right at 1 year. So from the time that we have signed the contract to the full platform launch live, we had a goal of 1 year, and we are right on track to meet that goal. We're putting our finishing touches on it right now. So when I shared this with the board, I made sure that I informed them that this was going to be a heavy lift, that there would be hiccups along the way because nothing is going to be perfect. But I also wanted, to share the foresight and the outlook that we have and the capabilities that we would be able to provide with this new platform. So that's kind of been the timeline. And then the main question that every finance person wants to know is, so how much is it going to cost? So what we actually went in and did, and we're seeing maybe it's even a little bit higher than this, is a little over a $50,000 savings year over year. Again, it's all still kind of shaking out. But that's kind of where we're landing. So the first thing that we looked at was a labor analysis. So we didn't need an analyst or a controller anymore. We were thinking about adding both of those positions. And if you guys can do any quick math in your head, both of those positions are a lot more than $50,000. But we were looking at bringing on an analyst because on the analyst side, we were having to do so much modeling and forecasting in Excel that it was just a huge lift to be able to go into Excel, model the amount of stuff that we needed, and also in the time frame that you needed, because I could model it, but I might not get to it for a month when really we needed the forecast last week. So we looked at a labor analysis there on the audit efficiency side. Some of the tools that Blackbaud has on the audit efficiency side has been second to none. So on the audit efficiency, last year or 2 years ago, our last audit in the GMS platform, we spent about $45,000 on our audit. This most recent year, we're going to be spending about $25,000 on our audit. And that's including a $6,000 mid-year audit. Which is something that we implemented as a tracking procedure here. So, just being able to pull reports faster, being able to look at exactly like just depreciation workbooks, things along those lines, that has been so beneficial for us. Revenue testing, expense testing, again, top to bottom has just been very nice to get all of it together. And then the last thing that we did was a direct cost analysis. And this was the only time that Blackbaud did not come out ahead from our other platforms. Blackbaud was more expensive directly, but when you lump all of those things together, Blackbaud came out to be a no-brainer. So if you are in the process of transitioning or anything like that, I would recommend don't just look at the direct cost analysis, but also look at some of the other analysis factors, the efficiency factor, how much labor is it going to take, so on and so forth. You can look at month-end closeout procedures, anything along those lines that will kind of help. Okay, this is what's happening, and this is how this platform is benefiting us. So that was a big one, and again, our board was incredibly supportive of it. So we were excited to go ahead and transition over. So the phasing implementation plan, which is kind of the reason for the presentation, how can we manage all of this in addition to all the other things that we're doing? So the thing that I had to recognize, I unfortunately think things happen a little bit faster than they can. So I maybe set out to be a little bit too aggressive on this, and I had to take a step back and realize, well, this is not just what we're doing. Our job is not to implement a new software. Our job is to, continue to do accounting. Our job is to continue to raise money, connect with donors, so on and so forth. So, I really had to think about how can we manage this in addition to all of the things that we have to do on a daily basis. And we worked as a team to come up with kind of this basic approach that will allow us to figure out how can we get the most important features rolled out early on, but also how can we not be pulling our hair out at 1 o'clock in the morning because we have month end and we've been so overloaded with this transition that we forgot to do month end closeout procedures. So that was been a big thing, and the implementation plan has turned out to work pretty well. So phase one, which lasted right around 1 month, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. So on the finance side, we did dual entry testing, and we actually did that on the CRM side as well. So what the dual entry testing was, so for example, we input all of our expenses, accounts payable, all of our donations, cash receipts, things along those lines into our current platform, so our every action in our GMS. And then we also implemented them into the Blackbaud platform. So we had a test database that kind of allowed us to go through and play with the features in Blackbaud. So then that way, what we were able to do is at the end of that month, we were able to run reports and we were able to say, okay, are expenses going where they want to go? Are we not going where they want them to go? So what we did and what we were able to identify is, for example, an account might not be posting the correct way. A donor cash receipt might not have gone into the right account. Just kind of the small semantics, and we were able to get that figured out before we actually went live. Now, I'm not going to say that we got all of the bugs figured out because we absolutely didn't. We're still, coming across things here and there. But it was a great way to kind of say, okay, we have an idea of this is where everything needs to be going. So we were looking at some baseline FE and baseline RE features. So the baseline FE features were our GL, payables, cash management. And then our cash receipts was just manual. So our cash receipts we would just import them directly into the Financial Edge software rather than flowing them through Razor's Edge. On the Razor's Edge side of things, the donor entry, we were just doing that manually as well, saying, hey, we got $50 from, Timmy down the street. It goes to our Meals on Wheels program. And we were just coding that through. And then again, at the end of the month, we pulled all of those records and compared it to our original system to see, okay, did these things come through the correct way? Did they not? And what do we need to adjust? Then phase two. Phase two was when we actually went live in the Blackbaud software. So once we closed out the month in GMS, our previous accounting platform, and every action, once we closed out that month, We set a date of January 1st, so everything December 31st prior was going to be housed in that platform. And then what we did was we went ahead and went live January 1st of 2025. So what we were looking at in this side of things was we were importing GL history. So kind of the way that we went through and did that is we went year by year. So for 2021, we would upload our previous GL history. We would check it against our audited financials. We would check our donor database against our donor database from that year. And then we would sign off on that. And then we would do 2022, 2023, 2024, so on and so forth. The last thing that we had to transition over was Q1 of 2025. So we went ahead and did that. We checked it against our original database and then our original CRM, and we made sure that all of that tied out. And then we went ahead and imported that. And then we double checked everything that, our database was good, that our financials looked good, and that they tied out to that previous system. And then we were pretty much fully ready to go in the financial ed system. So once we went live in there, again, we were just going live with those basic features that I mentioned previously: payables, GL, cash receipts, donor management, things along those lines. I don't know how your guys' fundraising portfolio or how your agency operates on the financial side of things. But those are really the ones that we used. We don't do a ton of accounts receivable. We don't do a ton of really complex pledge systems, anything along those lines. It's pretty straightforward. So I would say with these basic RE and FE features, we were able to do about 75% of the work that we needed to get done on a monthly basis in the Financial Edge suite or the Blackbaud suite, excuse me. And then anything that we weren't necessarily able to get done at that point, we were able to either say, hey, this is going to be an end of the quarter thing, this is going to be an end of the year thing, so on and so forth. The number one thing that we saw during this phase of implementation was trying to build out the years and the previous GL and donor history. Because what would happen is some of that would go into a different account, like I said, or just kind of get a little bit corrupted. And what that led to was at the end of the year, like if you didn't check it year over year, you can look up, and after 3 or 4 years of GL history or donor history, you're super far off. And you don't really know what year it came from. So yes, it took a little bit more time to go year by year and really kind of tie things out. However, it was more accurate in that way. And now I can go back and actually pull records, excuse me. So with that being said, you don't necessarily have to import over old GL history or your donor history or anything along those lines for the system to run, but I would recommend it because, again, you don't necessarily want to be keeping up with these old databases because the idea is, streamlined and collaboration and something that we have implemented to eliminate that, which is kind of like the Apple thing, right? So Apple has on their wireless mouse, Apple's connector is down here. And the reason they do that is because they want you to use the mouse wirelessly. So you have to turn it on its side to be able to use the mouse. So in a way, they kind of pigeonhole you into using the mouse and using the features. I kind of took a play out of their playbook, and I have pulled access to everybody on our teams, things to the old platforms. So I'm the only person that can go into the old platforms and see. So if I need a report for let's say a fundraiser for last year, I am essentially forcing our development department to go into the history in Razor's Edge and pull it from there rather than going back to the old database and saying, oh, well, let me just use this report. Because then ultimately, when we don't have access to that old database anymore, they're not going to have learned. So I would rather, have that learning curve now and get them comfortable with it now so that we can adjust as needed rather than, them kind of kicking the can down the road and then ultimately, once we don't have access to that old database anymore, they're like, oh, now I have to actually use this, but I don't really know how to. And at this point, we're a year, 2 years, 3 years into the Blackbaud suite, and nobody's really thought about any of those things for a while. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. How can you really drive buy-in? And I guess I kind of drove buy-in, I kind of forced buy-in. But either way you slice it, people are using the Blackbaud suite, which was the goal. Phase 3. So this is where we're getting a little bit more. We're getting a little bit more detailed in both the FE and the RE platform. So again, like I said, about 75% of our work can be done using just the baseline features. However, this is where we really start to get into this extra, 25%. This is where we really start to get into the advantages that Blackbaud and the Blackbaud suite were able to provide for our team. So adding in the reporting and the expense management to Financial Edge. Previously, all of the reports were done by hand in Excel. And I'll talk briefly about some of the reports that we operate on a regular basis. And then the expense management to FE as well. So the expense management has been a huge one for us because the expense management side of things, what we were previously doing is we had credit card papers. So like credit cards where you'd go in and you'd sign out your credit card and you'd have a signature saying, okay, this is approved, so on and so forth. And then, on a check request, you would have a piece of paper that goes to your supervisor, and the supervisor takes it to the CFO, and the CFO takes it to the finance manager for accounts payable to be done. So on and so forth. It's just a lot of paper, and it's a lot of moving parts. So on the expense management side, what we've been able to do is, number one, we've been able to use the attachment feature in the Blackbaud suite on both the Razor's Edge and the Financial Edge side, but specifically the Financial Edge side more so at this point. So with that, you can submit the receipt, you can put in the expense, you can code it to the GL, you can code it to your program, you can do all of that stuff through a credit card feed. And then basically all your supervisor does is looks and says, okay, yes, that's correct, check, it's good to go. So now it's going to post into the GL rather than having to do all of the paper trails, looking up, oh my goodness, I spilled coffee on this receipt, I don't know what this was for. And then, the auditor comes and lo and behold, they want that expense and you have coffee all over the receipt, they can't see it and you get dinged on your audit. Whereas with this, what we do is we do 3-month internal audits. So we go through, we keep paper for 3 months. We have an idea of everything. We double check every single one that says, okay, there's an attachment with this and it corresponds to the right thing. So that's been just kind of a tracking feature that we do to ensure that everything is going where it needs to go. And then on the expense management for the payable side, I've just set up workflows that can basically go through. So if a driver in our transportation department needs a check request, it automatically goes to the transportation manager. He can approve it and then it posts into payables. And then once it posts into payables, I'm able to see it and then approve it for the payables run. So that has been an absolute game changer for us because previously what would happen is the way that our internal controls work is myself and the CEO are the only two that are able to sign these check requests or these expense managements or the credit card receipts, excuse me. So we also happen to be the ones that travel the most frequently. So for example, I've been out of the office for the last 2 weeks and I have been at conferences. So when I came back, I would come with a pile of probably 50 things, 60 things to sign. And what that means is, number one, either credit card expenses were being backdated, or number two, credit card expenses weren't able to be charged because I didn't sign off, neither of which are best practice. Then on the check request side of things, there was no real way for me to sign a check request because I had to sign a paper copy in person. So if there was, I can't tell you how many times we would say, okay, I'm leaving on Tuesday and not coming back for a week. how many things do I need to sign in this week? So it just created this kind of bottleneck in our finance department of saying, well, we haven't even gotten the bill for this yet. So how do we sign this? So then again, it creates confusion. It's a nightmare. It just is not best practice. So that's where the expense management has really helped us. On the reporting side of things, every business, every nonprofit is going to have reports that they want to see frequently. You have your baseline out of the box ones, but these have also been extremely customizable as well. So a couple of things that I have kind of broken down is we have our monthly reports, we have our board reports, we have our audit reports, and we have ad hoc reports. So I'll go through a little bit of all of those categories. So our monthly reports are going to be, so what we look at is on our monthly reports, I'm going to look at our income statement and our balance sheet, kind of the basic ones. And then I'm also going to look at our AMR report, which I was able to build. So our AMR report is something that we're able to request reimbursement for our expenses from the state government. So I was able to build that out basically in conjunction with the request form that I have to fill out for them every month. So I mean, in the AMR, before, I probably took me 2 or 3 hours to do it with our old platform. With this new one, it's just data entry. It's taken me like 30 minutes. It's phenomenal. It's to the point now where I'm probably gonna delegate it to my finance manager, because it's really just data entry at this point. So that's been so nice on that front. Then I also have it automated to send out income statements by department, which is budget versus actual on their income statement, to all of our program directors' heads, or our program directors, the heads of each program. So the reason that we do that is, with us, we really encourage our program directors autonomy. We encourage them to manage their own budgets. We encourage them to really take ownership of their own program. With that being said, a lot of responsibility comes a lot of accountability. So we do expect a lot out of them, but at the end of the month, they get an income statement saying, okay, you have this much left to spend. What do we need to do? So they have a really good idea of that. And that comes to them every single month, same time every single month. And then the last thing that goes out on the monthly report is I have created kind of a CFO report that goes to our CEO. So our CEO used to be the CFO, so he has a very good handle on the finance functions. And he came to me when we were kind of transitioning over, and he was like, Ashton, like I know that like everything's okay, but it keeps me up at night because I have no idea what is going on. And I was like, okay, I can hear that feedback. Let me do this. So I created kind of this customer report for him that gives him an idea of the items and the KPIs that he wants to see, which has been really nice. We've been able to meet monthly now to discuss the finances, and I think he sleeps a lot better at night knowing, hey, I'm going to get this report every single month. The other thing that we're able to do is we're able to create our board reports. So our board reports are created on an automated schedule. Our board meets bi-monthly. So generally it's the second Monday of the month. So on the first Monday of the month has generally been closed. I will go in and I will get an automated report from Blackbaud. We do a 3-year income statement. We do a 3-year balance sheet comparison, and then we also do a 3-year investment statement comparison. So we can look at that. It comes straight to me, and then it also goes to our administrative assistant that puts everything in the board portal. So again, it just comes out of the box. I check it. It's ready to go. It's so nice on that side. The audit reports, we have a list of reports that our auditors need. So at the end of the year, I will just click a button, and those will pull all of the reports that they need. And then the last thing is our ad hoc reports. So there are certain things that I like to see, okay, how much money do we have left in this? Or how much money is this program spending? Or what are we spending on salaries? Anything along those lines. So what I can do is I've created some ad hoc reports, so I can go in and click through and I can say, well, how much have we charged to salaries? And then I can do some payroll forecasting numbers, and I can do that directly in there. I can create a scenario and I can say, well, if we increase labor by this amount, what is that going to do to our bottom line and our budget? So those are all features that, again, are very nice in the Blackbaud platform. But again, they do take some time to get up and to really figure out, okay, what do I want? What do I need? What's going to work best for my finance department and my agency? On the CRM side, the Razor's Edge side, we added in forms, email marketing, in addition to the baseline RE features, and we did the volunteer management module. So what that looks like is example for a form, if somebody has a contact or they want to sign up to volunteer or anything like that, a form will come in, and then we have it set up on our email marketing that it would just go directly out. Hey, thanks so much. Please fill out this intake form. We'll be in touch. Or, if somebody makes a donation online, thank you so much. We really appreciate this. And it goes through and then it pings our development manager based on the amount. Let's say it was a $500 donation. That might ping our development manager to say, okay, they got the automated email, but we also need to follow up with a card or a phone call or anything along those lines. So again, it's just kind of customizable to your baseline level of what your agency is working on. So for us, we definitely make sure that we take advantage of anything over $500 so that we follow up with a phone call, we follow up in writing saying, hey, this is kind of how we do it. And then we create kind of this plan to steward this donor along, which we can then track in the Razor's Edge platform as well. The last thing is the volunteer management module, which is really nice to be able to for example, we use volunteers for our Meals on Wheels. So if we have a route that's closed down for the day, we can just send out a blast through the email marketing and just say, hey, Williamson Road site closed for the day. No need to report. Thanks so much. So again, that's been nice. And then it's also been nice to be able to take those volunteer hours, assign a dollar value to them. And while they're not all in kind technically, we're able to utilize that amount of volunteer labor. And when we're applying for grants or we're speaking to donors or anything along those lines, we can say, well, we have generated this much revenue in in-kind labor every single year, every single month. Again, while you can't put that on an audit because there's very specialized things that you can put for in-kind labor on an audit, you can communicate that with, we have a huge volunteer base that provides us a huge amount of basically free labor every single year. And then the last thing that we did in this phase 3 was integrating FE and RE. So the big thing on that was on the cash receipt side of things. So when a cash receipt comes in, what was previously happening, it was being double entered and they weren't communicating with one another. So our finance manager was putting it in as a cash receipt. Our development manager was putting it as a donation. It didn't transfer over. So we set a date of April 1st saying that everything April 1st past gets put into Razor's Edge, which then flows through to Financial Edge. So if a donation comes in, what would happen is we would say $50 towards Meals on Wheels. We would code that on the Razor's Edge side. And then what we did, our development or our grant special projects did with our Blackbaud team is we then corresponded that to the correct Financial Edge account. So it populated automatically all the way through. Which was extremely nice because, again, you're only having to do it one time. You're not having to double enter anything. It just made the whole process a little bit easier. Now, something that we have to think about is, for example, our money from the federal and state governments. Those do not go through Razor's Edge because they're not necessarily grants. They're not necessarily grants and they're not necessarily contributions. So we do enter those directly into the Financial Edge database. However, on the Razor's Edge side, anything that we get on grants or anything along those lines has just gone through the Razor's Edge. Razor's Edge also allows us to better track grants so we can figure out how much, is it a drawdown? Is it, everything up front? Is it a reimbursement grant? How do we best manage this? And then we have an idea of what's our funding source? How much longer do we have to spend this money? And it's all visually available in one platform so that we can see, okay, well, we need to spend this money by the end of June. We have this much left to spend. We need to spend this by the end of this time. So again, it's just a really good way to have all of your data in one place to figure out how do we best allocate these resources for the needs of our clients. And the last thing, phase 4, which is what we are currently in. So we are wrapping this up right now. is we are finalizing some financial aids features, so fixed assets. Again, I had communicated previously that the difficulty that we had with depreciation in our old accounting software, but we are able to get that squared away. And then our accounts receivable, again, we don't do a ton of accounts receivable, but on the Blackbaud side, it's very nice because it will create kind of that automatic reversing entry. So that you don't have a receivable account that's just getting charged, and it's never getting offset. So that's been very nice. And then all of the workflows are running through Razor's Edge. So the grants tracking, the fund tracking, everything along those lines is through the Razor's Edge system. So again, from the time that we signed the contract last June till now, we have made so much progress. And it's nice to think about that hopefully by the end of this month, everything will be finalized and running. Now, again, there will be bugs along the way, but I mean, we have a bulk of the stuff out of the way, and our goal was to do it in a year. And, you know, could we have done it faster? Maybe. But again, my goal was with our team. I didn't want people pulling their hair out at the end of the day. Like, I mean, I could say as a CFO, maybe during this process, I had, out of the last 52 weeks, I might have had 4 weeks that I worked more than 45 hours. So, I mean, I don't really know very many CFOs that can say that. You know, I've been able to take vacation. All of the people on my team have been able to take vacation. You know, it's been something that has been very manageable for us. Could we have done it in 6 months? Maybe. But I probably would have been doing a lot of 60-hour weeks. So the last thing that I want to kind of talk about is follow-up and monitoring. So did this turn out like we hoped? And then I will leave a little bit of time at the end if anybody has any questions, and then we'll be good to go. So the monitoring procedures, number one was full management training. So with our agency, we have directors and then managers, and then we have our C-suite executives, then we have employees. So everybody that is a manager or above was expected to be trained on this Blackbaud software. Now, they don't need to know it in and out like I do and our finance manager does, but they do need to know, okay, supplies. What is a GL code for supplies? What even is a GL code? So I spent about a week in workshops with them, teaching them this is what a GL code is. So, you know, when you're coding to supplies, you're coding to salaries, you put in the GL code 50300. And then your program that is going to be assigned to you, or the program that you work in, is 110, home delivered meals. And then the funding sources that you use are C2. And again, it sounds like a lot, but after this workshop and, you know, just through open lines of communication, our management team has done a phenomenal job getting this up to speed. I mean, most questions are able to be answered at the director level, which we are fortunate. You know, we have some MBAs, some master's degrees on our director level. So we have a pretty high level director team. But it's been so nice being able to, you know, say, hey, this is kind of what we're doing, you know, because we really believed in our team and their ability, and we gave them the resources to be able to do this. And it's turned out really good. Continuing to update reports has been so important. You know, just the board likes to see it in one way. The CEO likes to see it another way. I like to see it another way. Anything along those lines, new funding sources, things like that, new fundraisers that come out, just keeping on top of that. Because again, if you build it once and it's automated, you don't have to go through and search for it every single time. So, you know, bear the work up front, bear the hour or two that's going to take to build you that report to save you hours on the back end, rather than having to do it by hand every single month. We had monthly check-in meetings with both our implementation team and our internal team. So that was our managers, but then also the individuals that I mentioned on this project. We all met every month just to kind of say, hey, what are we doing? Are we doing okay? Are we not? So on and so forth. And then we just actually wrapped this up. We did our mid-year audit. So the auditors that actually audit us at the end of the year, they come in for what's called an agreed upon procedure. And what we were able to do with them there is we were able to compare the databases. So for example, we went from, in our old system, we had revenue codes for every single different line item for federal money. So we had like 7 different titles. What we did this time is we just have federal revenue. So we had to communicate with the auditors. These 7 accounts in our old database roll up to make this one account. We also communicated with them on fixed assets, so an income summary account, how we were going to be recognizing revenue, how we were going to be, allocating our expenses, how we were going to be tracking receipts for revenue verification, everything like that. So we did all of that in the mid-year. So then when they come on site at the end of the year, we don't have to go back and check in those old databases. We can say, you guys gave us the go-ahead. You said we're good to go in June, so now we can move forward and just use the Blackbaud software. We also kind of train them on how to use the view only function in the Blackbaud software. So we can give them a view only access so they can click around. So rather than having to do revenue verification by hand where they say, hey, Ashton, can you verify revenue accounts, 1, 3, and 5? And I have to send over the revenue verification, they can just click in and say, okay, yeah, look, they have the grant receipt, they have the check here, that revenue is verified. We also do a Razor's Edge database audit. So the reason for that is what we had to be thinking about was, what happens if you miscode somebody's last name by a letter, right? Or if they have a different address or anything along those lines. So we wanted to eliminate any duplicate entries there so that we could all kind of be migrated into, because, Ashton King versus Ashton K versus Ashton King spelled wrong, it's all the same donor, and we know that. So we wanted to get a better picture of what did Ashton King actually give, rather than all 3 of those different individuals that were in our database. So that was a big thing that we continue to monitor over time. And then some hangups along the way. Again, nothing is perfect. It's not going to be, but we did have some hangups along the way. So some of the difficulty that we had in this mid-year audit was financial migration due to different funds and account codes. So again, right, we really, in thinking through this, I built it out in a way that, how is this easy? Right? So instead of having 10 different federal revenue sources, we just had federal revenue. Rather than having a bunch of different expense codes for salaries, we just had salaries. We just had fringe benefits. So it makes it easier from the perspective of if you have an issue that we ran into the other day was we have federal taxes, we have FICA, and then we also have federal taxes payable. So something has to give here. So what we did was we recognized that federal taxes, sometimes FICA was being coded to that, sometimes it was being coded to FICA. So we had to make an adjusting journal entry to move that federal tax over to FICA. So that's something that just kind of people get used to certain account codes, and we wanted to make sure that we're kind of just using the correct account codes, and then also unlocking or deleting the accounts that we don't really need. So again, just another way of making sure that we're minimizing the risk of error here. We had a lapse in communication with donors briefly. So kind of getting that email marketing over and getting it up to speed. We had about a week of downtime to kind of get everything over. But I mean, again, we had some other stuff queued up, so it wasn't that bad. But we did have a little bit of lapse in communication there. The account reconciliation between FE and RE was a little bit more of a process than we had originally hoped. It just trying to get the right things in the right funds and in also the right accounts was a little bit difficult, but we were able to move through that. The biggest thing that we've run into is these last 2. So the credit card fee limitation for expense management, the credit cards that we use don't have an out-of-the-box feature with Blackbaud. So we've had to go back and forth with the Blackbaud team to kind of get them to build a custom feed for us. We're in the process of getting that done, but it's not all the way there. The idea and kind of the features are there, but the whole execution of it is not. So that's been a difficulty. And the last thing is just staff buy-in. Again, trying to encourage people to use this, trying to get people to say, non-finance people to enter their GL codes in the correct way. There was that limitation on the buy-in side, but now people are starting to see, oh, this makes my life a lot easier. This is going to work. So the thing that I've really communicated is, again, bear the work now up front so that your life is easier in the future, which, seems to be a good approach and a good messaging feature to our team. And they've really bought into that. Again, I can't I can't stress enough how phenomenal our team, board of directors, CEO has been in supporting myself and the rest of the individuals involved in this process. So that is all that I have. I hope that you guys found this to be informative. Again, I tried to create a presentation that I thought about myself a year ago. How can I, best communicate with those individuals? So hopefully you guys got something out of it. If you can, please share any questions, I guess, in the chat. I'm happy to answer anything. I'll hang around for a little bit after. And there's also a survey. If you can fill out the survey as well on how this presentation was, that would be phenomenal. I really appreciate it. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their afternoon. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Well, thank you so much, Ashton. That was such a great session, just full of so much great insight on the process of your migration. And I did just launch the survey, so would appreciate if everyone could take a moment to fill that out. And yes, please don't hesitate to ask your questions. I don't see any questions in the Q&A yet. Looks like there's one question in the chat that you answered, Ashton.
Yep.
I'm also happy to hang on for a few minutes longer until see if anyone else has any questions that come up.
Yep, that works for me. All right. I guess if there's nobody else, we can call it a day.
Yeah, I think that is all for today. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and Ashton, again, thank you for the great presentation.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
All right, bye-bye.